safe to say that the war on drugs has been a massive failure everywhere we look that it's been implemented.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd say that prohibition is not the answer.
Yep.
That decriminalization is the answer. Actually having a government that puts money into rehabilitation for drug addicts and not into penalization. I think punishing a drug addict is like punishing somebody who got cancer. You can make an argument that they brought the cancer on themselves, and there's truth to that. I mean, there's a lot of factors in why someone becomes a drug addict or gets addicted to drugs, and maybe the argument can be made that it's not their fault in any way. If you look at like childhood trauma, like the nature of a human mind when it comes to how they're raised and their environment, I still think as a society, we can't get too in the weeds on holding people accountable. You could say, yes, it is their fault that they got addicted to drugs, but now they're addicted to drugs and they have a medical issue. Something that very few people can contend with. Most people who get off of those drugs go back on it or like struggle with it their entire lives. Crack, fentanyl, heroin, like these drugs, you know, nicotine is probably one of the most addictive substances on the planet Earth, but we just don't look at it the same way because it doesn't intoxicate you, right? But it's like people who smoke, who quit, want a cigarette every day for the rest of their fucking lives.
It's the number one most preventable death in the United States.
With tobacco?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sure,
Crazy.
sir. And I smoke on and off. I mean, I vape or whatever, but I'm highly addicted to nicotine. And I can only imagine if it was a hardcore drug, what that would have done to my life. I'd be broke and homeless and fucking stealing from people. You know what I mean? I would just be a homeless person in a ditch. Because,
because it
I'm
like
addicted to it, man.
chemically changes you, man.
Yeah, yeah. Fentanyl, heroin, crack, cocaine, like all these drugs, you become so chemically addicted to it that you just become a different person. And in the United States response has been to just ban, prohibit, and jail anybody for simple possession. It's done nothing but create more criminals. It hasn't lowered any drug use at all. We still have the same percentage of drug use that we did when they started the war on drugs.
50 years ago.
Yeah. And $1 trillion ago.
Yeah.
I just think the war on drugs has been a gigantic failure, and we need to stop punishing simple possession, and we need to treat people who are addicted to drugs like what they are, people with a medical condition. I mean, if you look at other countries that actually try to rehabilitate their drug addicts, their recidivism rates are way lower.
It's interesting too is the effect that our drug war has done to other countries that are also following suit or have followed suit. It's ruined them. I mean,
yeah.
when you prohibit something, you create a black market for that thing. I mean, prohibition of alcohol is a prime example.
Sure.
One of the reasons they wanted to get rid of alcohol originally was because the societal downfall of the perceived effects of alcohol were such that they thought banning it would make it better, but it made it worse. And then you had the fucking mafia come as a result. Like there's such a deep effect that takes place when you prohibit something that is essentially a commodity, like coffee or bread or whatever. Drugs are a commodity because they want to be consumed by people. If you outlawed coffee, there'd be a black market for coffee, and you'd have motherfuckers stabbing each other for it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to stop. The coffee drinkers would still drink coffee. It would just become violent.
It'd be more expensive too, because when you outlaw something and you don't regulate it, you could basically price it however you want. And then you have this culture of crime. Then you have generations of families who grow up in this culture of violence and secrecy and selling to communities, and it just doesn't make any sense, man. Why would you not in turn just try to regulate it, collect some tax on it?
It creates more drug addicts and criminals. Like
creates a black market.
Yep. Everything about it is negative.
Yeah.
And it's just ineffective. And it's just, Christian moral grandstanding is the original thing. Also racism. A lot of the war on drugs initiated by Nixon was specifically targeted at the hippies and the blacks. Like that's who, like I actually have a quote here from, he's the assistant to the president for domestic affairs under Nixon, John Ehrlichman. You want to know what this war on drugs was really about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate with the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. This is what the war on drugs was about.
So I think that's probably a good example of like that coming to light, but it goes back even farther than that. So when the Chinese come over and they were smoking opium, we prohibited opium smoking by them because we were afraid they were going to, I don't know, like come into their own and become these monsters and take our women,
rape our whites.
Yeah, right.
Who knows?
Right, and then marijuana was stigmatized because in the 70s because of Mexicans. Like, it's so silly, man. It's so silly.
It seems like all drug prohibition, most has been just based on like racism, on not liking a group of people.
But yeah, now these certain types of people are using these drugs, and okay, well that's a threat. Let's outlaw it. And by outlawing it, maybe we'll outlaw the person. I don't know what the thought is, but it's pretty. Yeah,
it's to put down particular groups they don't want. Really, I mean, it's just racism. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't like blacks, we don't like Mexicans, we don't like Chinese people, we don't like whoever. Government policy has been geared towards. That's the thing with people that deny the systemic racism. Like, yes, the left has made some stuff cartoonish in the systemic racism, but to pretend it doesn't exist in our history all throughout our history is insane. I mean, Jim Crow was 60 years ago? We had, separate water fountains. So the number of people currently incarcerated in the U.S. is 2.3 million. 1 in 5 are for a drug offense. 24% are black people, even though they make up 13%.
Jesus, man.
Yeah. Now, I some of you might say, well, hey, that's because black people do more drugs. You're racist. I just want you to know that.
They target their drug enforcements in those neighborhoods.
Right. Well, yeah, there's a myriad. I mean, we could do a whole episode on racism and why the numbers are the way they are. But it's certainly, I mean, if you believe that it's just because that's what black people do, you're a racist. I mean, that is just what it is.
It's what low income people do.
Right. And what people who've been oppressed and who were literally segregated 60 years ago and enslaved hundreds of years ago. I mean, there's just so much. Than the redlining of districts. There's so much that goes into why the stats are what they are and why they make up 24% of the prison and 13% of the population. 350,000 of those are marijuana arrests, which that's 350,000 people that shouldn't have been arrested. That's a little bit of breakage, don't you think? Like that's insane.
What's the economic impact of those 350,000 people? If we had 350,000 capable people walking around the streets, being productive, building roads, bridges, and teaching, but doing something productive, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's fucking insane.
Doing drugs makes you not anything. Like, it doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you good. Like, plenty of good people do. Most people that do drugs are good people.
Sure.
People just like,
but probably the majority of them. Yeah, absolutely.
And the people that would say otherwise probably got a beer in their hand right now.
Yeah.
And don't realize what insane hypocrites they are.
I read a statistic that out of all drug arrests, 40% of that drug arrest is marijuana. What are we talking about? Like, it's fucking legal in most of the states now.
Yeah, well,
half the states.
Marijuana, we are finally getting to a point where there's some sanity. People are really starting to realize, like, okay, we've had some states that were the experiments that went legal way earlier on and nothing fucking horrible has happened. I mean, there's some negative effects when you legalize a drug, but the positives way outweigh the negatives by a lot. I mean, I'm pretty sure in Colorado when they started, like, DUIs dropped drastically because people are choosing weed. Because there's some people who just don't want to do things that are illegal, and that's fine, of course. I mean, I'm not going to shit. Like, I personally just do what I think is moral, and I don't give a fuck about the law. The law doesn't dictate my morality. I'm a good person, I think, and I just don't do things that are bad. Let people put what they want into their own bodies, right? Let people have bodily autonomy, and then regulate the consequences to some degree. If you're on crack and you commit a crime, you should be punished for committing a crime. You shouldn't be punished for being on crack. We just spent another episode ripping on the right, but it's like this concept of small government and staying out of our lives, but Make sure you get in between a woman and her doctor. Make sure that you tell gay people they can't have sex. Make sure that people can't put what they want in their own bodies. Here's the financial impact on the war on drugs. $293 million worth of equipment transferred from the military to law enforcement through the 1033 program in 2019 alone.
To militarize the police.
Yeah, for
to fight drugs.
Yeah, it's
how insane is that?
Yeah, for a war that doesn't work.
The war is a concept, by the way. It's not even like it's not a real war. I mean, it's a real war, but it's a concept. Like, you could stop it right now.
Yeah, because it's the war on human nature.
It's a war on human nature and the consumption of commodities.
Yep. $3.5 billion is the amount of money taxpayers will spend funding the Drug Enforcement Agency in 2021.
That could go to, what do you think?
Healthcare,
schools,
infrastructure, schools.
You named it.
Fucking anything other than this bullshit.
Yeah.
$6,500 is how much money the Drug Enforcement Agency costs to run per minute.
$6,500 per minute.
Per minute is what it costs. $47 billion is the estimated amount that the U.S. government will spend per year enforcing drug prohibition. For what? It doesn't work. The numbers are the same. It's immoral. It's telling people what to do with their bodies. So there's all this talk about banning certain firearms because of shootings. Shootings would drop drastically if we ended the war on drugs. The vast majority of shootings are with pistols and shotguns and gangland shootings over drugs.
Over drugs.
That's what the shootings come from. The massacres of little kids, which is fucking horrible, with assault rifles, the shit that makes the news and gets everybody riled up, is a minute percentage of actual shootings that happen. And so ending the war on drugs, especially when we're talking about something like marijuana, which has no business being illegal, which is way less detrimental than alcohol, the drug of choice for America. It's insane that we will put people in prison for their whole lives. We have people who are in prison their whole lives because of marijuana possession. The idea that we would spend this much time and energy for a plant that is far less harmful than the drug that we all seem to love is insane. And I think America's starting to really wake up to that. Obviously, we have groups of people who aren't, and they just need to be plowed through legislatively until they fuck off. But for the most part, like, just legalize marijuana, decriminalize all the other drugs, change our penalization system over to a rehabilitative system so that drug addicts with simple possession can just get help. Like, let's just do what's effective.
And then if you also look at over the 50 years, that's always been a campaign point for Democrats and Republicans, is what side can go after the hardcore drugs better than the other. And then as the normal everyday person at home who's not like reading and keeping up on life, he says, oh, wow, yeah, they really care about the safety of my children. They really care about our communities. I might vote for him because his stance on drugs is way harder than the other guys is. It's all bullshit.
So the way you keep your kids off drugs is to be a good parent and try to teach them about drugs. Don't lie to them about drugs. It's not really the government's job to tell people what they can and can't put in their own body. But like you said, decriminalize all of it, in my opinion. There's people that make an argument for full legalization of everything, but, at least decriminalize everything, legalize marijuana, tax the fuck out of marijuana, put it into your schools, put that money into your roads. And,
look talking about the tax money, not the marijuana, right?
Yeah, well, if you want to put it into your schools and roads, that's fine. It comes with your class books, just a fucking fat sack. Then treat the people who are addicted to them like patients, not horrible criminals, because we create criminals. You take somebody who was not a criminal, who just tried a drug, happened to get caught, especially if they're like a young black kid in a community that's over-policed and way more likely to be caught for those kind of things. And then they go into jail with fucking killers, with people who are drug dealers. They learn how to be a criminal. They're told that like they're not going to be anything but that, and the system's already showing them that. And then they come out criminalized. It's having the total opposite effect that it was ever intended to have. It's ridiculous. We should be better than this at this point.
I knew a woman who was arrested for possession of marijuana in Kentucky. This was like 7 or 8 years ago. She did a year and a half in jail, man. A year and a half in jail for just possessing. And it was like a really small amount, but they had mandatory minimums.
Yeah, mandatory minimums are a disaster.
And it ruined her life, man.
Yeah.
She did a year and a half in jail. What are we talking? I listened to an interview the other day. There was a guy who had a cocaine charge He was year 20 into his prison sentence on a 40-year prison term.
Over simple
40
possession.
years over some cocaine. What are we doing, man? And then all of a sudden, you'll have people who were instrumental in the war on drugs, quote unquote. Now these people are proponents of legalizing and decriminalizing marijuana. And how did we not have this common sense 50 years ago? Is the communities that we have, is this like new? Is this like some experiment? No, we've had this issue for thousands of years.
Well,
there's always been drugs. There's always been people wanting to feel different.
Well, again, it's because it's not about the drugs. It's about putting down the communities that we associate with the drugs and with social control. So this is, I don't know, well, this is an off topic, but why are drugs that actually potentially have a benefit for the user or wake the user up illegal? And why is alcohol so encouraged? I mean, what does alcohol do? It makes you social. It makes you dumb. And I'm a drinker. Like, I like alcohol. Things like heavy doses of marijuana, psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, DMT, ayahuasca, like these drugs will bring you out of your own head into a feeling of consciousness that you've never had, will make you question authority. I think there's an argument for medicinal psychedelics. You eat some psilocybin and meditate for 8 hours and become a better human being from it. I've had trips that were beneficial to me as a person, that let me see things about myself and the world that I would not have been capable of seeing otherwise. And people who do that aren't as easy to be controlled. You want your population going to work every day and then coming home and just sitting there drinking, just dumbing down their mind, watching something, getting up and doing it. You do not want people who are exploring their own consciousness, who are exploring the nature of power and power hierarchies and how the world works and are like actually trying to change the world around them. You want dumb, productive worker bees. And so alcohol, good, marijuana, psilocybin, LSD, all those are bad. It's not for public health that we're banning those kind of drugs specifically. It's because those drugs, I think, genuinely threaten power. Like they're learning things about themselves. They're waking up. I mean, that's what the 60s was about. People were doing a lot of those drugs, and there was a lot of goofy bullshit that came out of that movement because you can abuse drugs just like anything else. But like, there's a lot of people who realize that the system that we currently have is ridiculous. The people in power are fucking liars. And things like those kind of drugs are catalysts to those ideas.